Does Booth have a choir?
Yeah. It's an international choir. They've actually gone to Hungary and sang at one of our partner churches that's like, I don't know, 400 years old or something.
We are now recording.
I vaguely remember that. Hi, Gail. Nancy, you've got great lighting on you.
Good.
It's good.
See how it goes as the time goes by.
Hi, everybody. We're delighted that you could join us tonight. We'll wait just another minute or so in case there's some other folks working their way toward the Zoom room.
I'll go to the front door and let him in.
Yeah.
They're breaking the doors down.
Yeah,
They want to use the restroom down the hall.
that's right.
Well, a 90-degree day for crying out loud. That was amazing.
I didn't know it got that made it to 90. That's got to be a record, I would think.
No, 93 was the record.
Oh, really? Wow.
Right. In fact, I have to open another window. Hold on.
I'm gonna
Warm up or cool off.
I'm gonna yell down to my wife that it's time to sign on. She's going to sign on her computer.
Oh, good. That's great. Gail, you're still muted in case you want to unmute. Since it's such a small group, we'll probably stay unmuted, I would think.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the camera set up.
Got it.
I had it all unplugged.
Right, lined up and everything.
Well, I get kind of zoomed out where I just can't do it anymore some days.
That right, yeah.
I know that feeling.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. It sounds like we've got at least one more person showing up from the other room and the other side of Scott's house. I'm just gonna welcome you tonight and just a few housekeeping mentions. Scott's gonna be monitoring the chat for any questions. If we don't have many more people, then we'll probably be okay to stay unmuted if you care to, or unmute yourself when you'd like to, and to be part of a conversation if we're having a discussion. But if you have questions, put them in the chat and we'll pay attention to that. And I'm trying to remember, what did we decide about questions? Is it going to be in between or just at the end? How did we decide that?
I think we're going to do them at the end.
Okay. So
I will interrupt if there's something that sort of is unclear, but otherwise we'll do the questions at the end.
Is
Thank
that
you.
what you want to do, Linda?
That sounds fine.
Okay, good. We do have a designated Q&A time. I just skipped over that part. At any rate, we're delighted that you're here, and Scott's going to introduce our presenters.
Thank you, Sharon. Oh, it's really a pleasure to introduce our members of a Citizens Climate Lobby tonight. Nancy Basinger, who many of us know from church, was the co-founder of the Boise chapter, and she's an active member and is our CCL representative to Representative Simpson. She's a veterinarian who still works part-time at the animal shelter in McCall, and she loves hiking and diving into a good book. Linda Rytterager is the group leader of the Boise chapter currently. She's a retired English as a second language teacher and enjoys hiking and kayaking with her husband, Bruce. And they're going to be talking to us tonight about carbon pricing, solving the climate challenge. Take it away, Linda.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your Earth Month activities. I've always had a special regard for the earth and for nature. And like you, I'm sure I've tried to live lightly, to recycle, to make careful consumer choices, and to support various environmental groups. But I wanted to do more to have a bigger impact on the serious issue of climate change. So in the spring of 2017, I went to the March for Science at the State House. I made a sign. I know if you were there, maybe you saw me. I was the pro-fax sign. Good. And that's where I met Nancy, giving out flyers about CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby. So I learned more about the group, and I was attracted to its goals and actions, methods, and the focus on actions. And I know some of you, I think maybe all of you, are members of CCL, perhaps for similar reasons. Hi, Adam. So for those of you, so let me share my slides now. There we go. Is that working all right? Hello?
Yeah, that looks fine,
right.
Linda. The little gray things are there, but they're going away.
Okay. So for those who might be unfamiliar, let me introduce Citizens Climate Lobby. We're an international organization founded by the late Marshall Saunders, who believed strongly in the power of political will. He started the first chapter in 2007 and called for citizens to lobby Congress in a relentless, unstoppable, yet friendly and respectful way. And that call has resonated with nearly 200,000 supporters in more than 560 chapters around the world, where we've really grown. I was glad to join this group of volunteers working to advance climate policy solutions through education, outreach, and lobbying. Our Boise chapter collaborates with other groups working on climate, like Drawdown, like this climate action team. And we're guided by the values of optimism, personal power, relationships, and nonpartisanship, among others. I became group leader in 2020. I'd like to tell you about the climate solution we support, carbon pricing. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here because everybody on this call is pretty familiar with the idea, but sometimes it's good just to step back and kind of review. So Nancy, after I speak, Nancy will talk about the status of the legislation and concerns that some people have about this solution. And then we'll take questions and try to get some answers. So our focus is on national climate policy, and we support carbon pricing because it works at a scale large enough to meet the challenge of reducing carbon emissions and lets people choose for themselves with incentives to choose wisely while not placing a burden on those who are poor or disadvantaged. It's a durable solution so that a change in political leadership can't easily overturn it. And it creates jobs and a robust economy for all. Specifically, we'd like to see a carbon fee and dividend plan enacted, like the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which was reintroduced in this current Congress in April as HR 2307. In this type of policy, a fee or tax is assessed at the earliest point of sale, at the mine, well, or port, wherever fossil fuels enter the economy. The fee is based on the metric tons of carbon dioxide pollutants the fuel emits, starting at $15 per metric ton and rising by $10 per ton each year, unless the emission targets are not met, and then it goes back up to $15 per ton. 100% of the revenues would be returned to US households on a per capita basis as equal monthly dividends. Adults receive full shares and children receive half shares. This carbon cashback has no spending restrictions And it would protect lower and middle income families who might otherwise not be able to afford the transition to a low carbon world. An important part of the policy is the carbon border adjustment, which protects trade competitiveness. So a border fee adjustment is placed on goods that cross our borders in either direction. This adjustment prevents the carbon fee from putting American businesses at a competitive disadvantage in global markets. It'll also discourage companies from relocating overseas to avoid the fee and encourage foreign countries to adopt their own border adjustment so they would not need to pay the fee. So that's how the plan works. Now let's talk about the benefits. Carbon pricing is a single most powerful tool we have to get to net zero by 2050. Recent studies show a strong economy-wide price on emissions will reduce America's carbon pollution by 30% in the first 5 years alone. Affordable clean energy. America leads the world with technology innovation. And when government puts a price on carbon, it sends a signal through the economy. Businesses respond by becoming more energy efficient and innovating to provide abundant, affordable, reliable energy, clean energy, and drive us faster toward net zero carbon pollution. Carbon pricing also saves lives. Doctors like Scott Smith and Kathy helped us understand that air pollution from fossil fuels and its impact on our health is worse than we thought. New research shows that premature deaths due to air pollution in the US each year are nearly twice as high as previously understood. The carbon price will save 4.5 million American lives by 2050 by restoring clean air across the country. And it'll make a significant difference in communities of color, which have suffered the worst health effects and make them more vulnerable to the impacts of COVID. A carbon tax becomes affordable for ordinary Americans when the money collected from fossil fuel companies is given as a dividend. It puts money in our pockets. Household impact studies show that the monthly dividends are enough to cover increased costs of 85% of American households. And that includes 95% of the least wealthy. The dividend allows families the freedom and flexibility to spend the money as they see fit to adapt to climate change and the carbon price. And economists agree. It's the most cost-efficient way to lower America's pollution. Led by Janet Yellen, now serving as Secretary of Treasury, nearly 3,600 economists, including 27 Nobel laureates, signed a statement declaring that a steadily rising tax on fossil fuels is the most cost-effective lever to reduce the emissions at the scale and speed necessary. Economists also support an equal dividend. For these reasons, we believe the Energy Innovation Act, while not the only solution, is the best first step in solving the climate challenge. Now, Nancy is going to talk about the status of the bill and how its initiatives fare against other plans and concerns.
Thanks, Linda. And I did see one question from Gail that I will address as I go along, and because it's a good one, it's a great one. So let me put up my slideshow. Okay, if everybody's ready, I'll start my part. So thank you again so much. It's really nice to be here. And I just want to say, I imagine that all of us here on this call are feeling like I am, which is this huge relief that the administration in charge is finally taking climate seriously, and being really excited to see what kind of solutions actually come into place over the next few years. You know, and it's really tempting after all these years to think, you know, finally the people in charge have got this problem under control. We can turn our attention to something else. But Citizens Climate Lobby is focused more than ever to make sure that the climate policies that climate scientists say really are the most impactful are the ones that get put into place. And we don't feel like we can just waste this opportunity with this momentum to settle for goals of net zero goals that sound really good, or policies that, you know, they're helpful, but they really aren't truly getting us on that path to climate stability. So there's three big ideas I want to cover in the next few minutes. So I want to help you learn about the status of CCL's preferred climate solution in Congress, and then understand how the American Jobs Plan, which is the Biden proposal, group of proposals, would complement the EICDA. I'm going to use those letters from now on. And then also consider some of the concerns that people have mentioned about carbon pricing as part of the solution. So the Energy Innovation Act now has 41 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives, and they represent a wide variety of Democrats. There's not yet a version of the bill in the Senate, but there is a similar bill in the Senate called Americans Clean Future Fund. Representative Deutsch, who is a lead co-sponsor of the House bill, is still in negotiation with Republicans to bring them on as co-sponsors. And of course, CCL is working really hard to help build support on Republicans. And so I wanted to just give you a minute to look at where these sponsors are coming from, which caucuses, and read a couple of their statements about why they are supporting this bill. Okay, so Linda has already mentioned this, but I'm going to kind of emphasize again that the big idea of carbon pricing is that it sets the stage for every other climate policy to work better. Because without a price on that carbon pollution that accounts for the harm it does to society, fossil fuel prices remain artificially low. That's a huge subsidy to fossil fuels. It makes it much harder to keep them in the ground, because once we have different energy choices that are all reflecting their more true cost to society, it's much easier to make that transition to low carbon choices. And so what initiatives in the Biden plan complement the EICDA? And I know probably everybody here has heard that term silver buckshot, that we don't have one silver bullet solution that is going to solve climate change. It's going to need many, many solutions. But if we feel like carbon pollution pricing is a fundamental policy, what other things need to go with it? What are good matches for other types of policies? So here are some of the major climate proposals in the Biden administration. You can see methane, upgrading the electric grid, energy storage technology, transport, EV charging station, and building energy efficiency. And I put green checks on all of these because they complement very well, because in all these areas, government is needed to fund that basic research and development so that these technologies can scale up at time. That last national clean electricity standard has a question mark to it. The reason is some analysis says that there are already reasonable low carbon options for power. and that what we need is that carbon price to provide the incentive for those options to be used, and that may be a cheaper and faster way to go than a clean electricity standard, which is a big part of the Biden plan right now. So we'll just have to see how things go. Another part of this conversation is that fortunately, there's a really strong consensus that climate solutions must be developed in the context of environmental justice. So I wanted to discuss that idea just a bit in the context of a carbon fee and dividend. So I'm apologizing for this slide beforehand, but this is, I think, a topic that really deserves a couple minutes of exploration. And the idea is that a carbon fee avoids the loopholes of cap and trade, because many environmental justice advocates warn that some carbon pricing schemes allow for pollution hotspots to remain in disadvantaged communities. And they cite evidence from California, which uses their cap and trade program to price carbon. But the real problem is not really with the carbon price, but these so-called offset problems, where companies continue to emit pollution in communities, and then they offset that pollution by doing something like, preserving forests someplace around the world. But there's two things to know about this legitimate concern. And one is the story in California is better than some people think. And this slide comes from a study by two UC Santa Barbara economists. And they looked at the pollution before the cap and trade. And these different bars that you see are different types of air pollution. And the height of the bars refers to the concentration of that pollution in low-income communities. So the higher the bar, the more that pollution is concentrated in low-income communities in California. So this was in 2008. And you can see between that and 2012, this problem was just getting worse. Pollution was getting dumped in these low-income communities. And then in 2017, after 5 years of California's cap and trade, this situation was somewhat better and certainly not worse. But the other big point is that this could have been much better with, instead of these carbon offsets, that there was a transparent, steadily increasing carbon price, which is why in 2017, the California Environmental Justice Advisory Committee urged California to replace its cap and trade system with a system like a carbon tax or a fee and dividend. And, another thing that we hear, and I hear this from conservative audiences that I've spoken to, is that, subsidies benefit the wealthy. It's the well-off people that can afford to invest in solar panels or buy a Tesla and then get that nice tax credit. And the statistics bear that out if you look at those statistics. So carbon fees, the other problem I would say with tax credits is they actually discourage the best and lowest cost climate solution of all, which is energy efficiency. But carbon fees, on the other hand, encourage everyone to not only find the cleanest energy alternative, but use it efficiently. But I feel like this is a perfect example of why some of those Biden programs, like helping low-income people with home efficiency projects, would really match well and benefit a carbon fee working together. And we've talked quite a bit about this, the carbon dividend coming back to people and equal shares to use however they want. And I wanted to just show this little graph that kind of explains how that works. And so this graph came from a 2020 study that was commissioned by CCL. And it shows what would happen the first year at that $15 price. So this, it shows the first impact, and the $15 ton per ton would be about 15 cents a gallon of gas, to give you some, scale of it. And you see the costs and dividends for each income quintile. The lowest quintile on the left going over to the right, the highest quintile. And we talk about equal dividends, but you see that these numbers are not, these dividend numbers in the green are not equal. That's because the dividend is taxed as income. And so because lower income brackets are in lower tax rates, they actually do even better after taxes. And you also see, this is just a graphic to show you how everybody up until the fourth quintile, that 80%, comes out ahead or breaks even. And you see here, these are the wealthy people that tend to have more direct, indirect, and these are like investment costs of the carbon tax that are passed on. And they are the only group where that dividend usually does not completely compensate for their increased costs. But again, they're high income people, so they're going to be able to afford that extra few $100s a year. And I think the other thing that this illustrates is the beauty of democratizing this transition to low carbon energy. Everybody is getting this payment, and as time goes by, they can make decisions. They can use that money to lower their carbon footprint even more and come out further ahead. So that's the dividend coming back as a graphic. Oh, and the question that Gail mentioned, who gets a dividend? Right now in the bill, as I understand it, it is anybody with a social security number or a tax ID number. And I will say, as a point of discussion, that would be, that does not include people that are here, undocumented workers. So that could be something that would be, I would think, up for negotiation in that bill, but that's where it stands now. And excuse me, one other thing we're talking about, economists really like this bill, which they do, this concept, because they say it's so economically efficient. But what does that really mean? It means that carbon fees, in many instances, can cut emissions at much lower costs and regulations. This example here is from a study from MIT. And they found that these tougher new CAFE standards would cost the economy almost 6 times as much for the same decrease in emissions that you would get from using less gasoline than a $45 carbon fee. And the question is, why the huge difference? Well, the example is that a carbon fee would provide immediate incentive for everybody to drive fewer miles, make fewer trips, carpool, take transit if that's available. Whereas these CAFE standards would only be squeezing out efficiency of the brand new cars that they're coming online. Now, that does not mean that this bill or CCL favors rolling back a CAFE standard. The bill specifically retains all the air pollution standards and the CAFE standards. But the idea, you don't have to wait until we turn over our car inventory to get more efficient cars. You can start working on that immediately. So as a sort of a wrap up, I just wanted to sort of recap our big points for this presentation. And it's that carbon fees are simpler, they're more transparent than other forms of carbon pricing, and that equal cash dividend to all people is fair. And it also ensures ongoing public support, which is a really important part of that. If people are getting monthly checks that are increasing every month, it's going to have a lot more political stability as time goes by and allows that carbon fee to increase. And I'll just say, one of the concerns with a carbon fee is it would stay very low. It would just be sort of a window dressing. But if you give that money back in proportion, that allows you to bring that fee up to where it really becomes consequential and effective. The other idea is that price signals work throughout the economy. They let everyone participate versus the government saying, you know, we're going to regulate this industry and we're going to regulate that industry. This works throughout the entire economy immediately. Within 90 days, it begins decreasing emissions. But it's important that carbon fees have to be complemented by thoughtful regulation. That makes a good match. And all of us who know the extent of this climate crisis know that we have to have US climate policy that influences world emissions. We cannot do it on our own. So that's what I had to say. And I'll turn it back over to Linda and Scott. Thank you. So, oh, I better stop sharing. Okay. Oops, you're muted, Linda. Oops, okay.
That was great. Thank you. All right. So a couple of good questions came up during the slides. I wonder if there are any others that we can answer now.
I did want to point out that Adam really liked your term carbon pollution pricing.
Okay.
Oh, Dennis would like to know, where is the carbon fee and dividend in place anywhere else in the world, and how is it working?
Do you want to take that, Linda?
Would you please do it, Nancy?
Well, clear back in 2008, this plan was started in the province of British Columbia, and it was a revenue neutral carbon price, but the dividend was as tax credits, which I think has been decided it might be easier in some ways, but people don't have that transparency of that dividend coming back. But it worked very well in that British Columbia's economic growth actually matched or exceeded the rest of Canada. And then the emissions went down significantly. So it worked in British Columbia. And then very excitingly, over a year ago, the whole country of Canada is having a carbon fee and dividend system, is kind of just getting off the ground. It has had some backlash. It has survived its latest court challenge, and it is up and running. I have a slide that I can share of what's happened in Sweden, but I don't know that that's a dividend. But if I can, let me share that slide from one of my hidden, let's see if I can find that.
While you're looking for that, I'm going to front the next question, which is, what is the toughest sell to get people to adopt this approach?
Can everybody see that screen there on Sweden?
Yeah.
Right, this is an example of how this is the carbon fee. This is Swedish emissions and US emissions, and this is where Sweden started their carbon fee. And you can see the drastic drop, but they also, I think their economy grew just as strongly. So this is how effective it was in Sweden. So I'll stop that.
And it is to answer the question about the hard sell, I think especially from our experience in Idaho with a very conservative population, I think selling this to in a bipartisan way has been more difficult than we maybe anticipated. So I think maybe the hard sell there is the idea of a tax being placed on products that so many of us rely on. I know I'd like to hear from Adam maybe and Nancy about that.
Adam, are you there?
I am. Yeah, I was actually just typing a question in the chat kind of along those lines. And the first question was, this was an excellent presentation. The slides were beautiful, so very well done. And I thought the communications was very clear. It seemed like some of the material was tailored to those that are, vote Democrat and are skeptical of carbon pricing. Was that intentional? Because I thought it was very effective. I mean, I probably wouldn't classify myself as that, but I thought it was very effective to addressing some of those concerns.
It was because, I think we've been sort of surprised, because all 41 co-sponsors of this bill are Democratic, and you can see they represent a lot of pretty progressive wings of the Democratic Party. But at the same time, there is sort of in some progressive circles, an ideological aversion to market-based solutions. There is some, bad blood there. And so we're trying to kind of bring those questions out in the open and address them straightforwardly.
Nancy, I was wondering if you have talked about this proposal with Representative Simpson.
Many, many times. But, they're very busy. And so we have to keep going back a bit. But I will tell you, we actually just had a 30-minute meeting with Representative Simpson last month. He's very familiar with it. He knows that there are companies now that are starting to talk about carbon pricing. He, I would say, is still in the camp of wanting to, give incentives and subsidies to clean energy. He's not, like the rest of Republicans, really comfortable yet with putting a price on fossil fuels. But I will say he's familiar with it, and he is much more open-minded. He gets it, but he's not quite there yet.
Yeah, and a lot of times when our liaisons have met with the lobbyists, with the members of Congress, one of the pushbacks we get is that this is going to be a burden on rural populations or some groups that, especially in Idaho, that we have such a rural population, that it would disadvantage them, placing higher costs. So I guess maybe a good answer for what's been the hardest was answering questions from people on the right and people on the left who have concerns about different parts of the bill.
Along those lines, we have a question about, do you think we will get Republican representatives that will become co-sponsors?
Yeah.
We hope so.
I think that there is a lot of work behind the scenes that we don't know. They were trying very hard to get a Republican co-sponsor before it was reintroduced, but they also saw things moving so quickly as climate policy that they felt like it was important to get it out there on the table. We know that there is at least one senator, Senator Romney, who has said he is very, 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 3 verys, open to carbon fee and dividend. So, there's some Republicans in the Senate, and I was listening to a Senate Finance Committee hearing, and they were talking a lot about carbon pricing. And I heard Lindsey Graham say, I need to know about this dividend, how it might help. So there are some Republicans in the Senate that are openly talking about this idea. So, it's possible. I don't know.
Sharon.
I have a question. Does Citizens Climate Lobby ever say, put a price on pollution? Is
Yes,
that
it's one of our hashtags? Price on pollution.
Okay. I have felt that it is monumentally unfair that the occupants of a valley or residents of a state are made ill, or the water's polluted or whatever, while some company is making profit. And I just am startled that people don't agree with me. I always have been that sad person who thinks everybody ought to agree with me, I guess. But the pollution, the slide you showed about how many people become ill from air pollution, and we know from a presenter just the other night that whole communities are polluted, and not just fossil fuels, but for a variety of reasons. But it's such a disproportionately unequal setup that I just can't imagine that isn't the compelling argument. It's not fair.
And what do people say to you, Sharon, when you make that argument?
Well, I don't know. Either they don't say anything or they agree with me. I'm careful who I talk to, I guess.
Yeah, I think, and Citizens Climate Lobby, our leadership has come out with some great new messaging that focuses on things like the health, the benefits for health if we all have cleaner air. And so that's one of the big messages that we want to make sure the benefits that people know about. The slide deck that I pulled from to create my slides were some of the newest messaging from CCL National. So we've got a team there that's working in Washington, trying to understand, gets information from our chapters about what our Congress people are saying, and tries to respond to that and answer those concerns.
And Adam just put in the chat a paper that was considered by a conservative outreach director to be one of the best summaries he's seen for Republicans who want to look at this complex mixture of tax credits and subsidies. So I just glanced at it, but it looks like a really nice resource.
Yeah, on the conservative side of things, I referenced this paper the other day to Nancy, and our recently retired conservative outreach director is very well respected. He's very experienced. And this is only about 7 or 8 pages. And I've read a lot, from the Republican viewpoint, just thinking about the Republican viewpoint. And this, if you're going to read 8 pages to try to communicate better with Republicans, this is probably the best 8 pages I've read. I would highly recommend that link if you are interested in trying to convince Republicans.
I had a question about the dividends. Because I think that the theory of this carbon fee and dividend, I really agree with, but how the dividends would work, because just looking at how they've done the stimulus checks, my husband's a tax accountant, and I can't tell you how many people still have not gotten their first check, haven't gotten their second check. It's just like, if these are like monthly or ever, it would be such a mess. And I could just see, Republicans using that as maybe a argument against it. So I think it'd be pretty important to get that, try to get that streamlined and, buttoned up as much as they could.
I'll make a comment on that. CCL did do what they hired the guy who put out the stimulus checks, I think when Obama was, those first emergency stimulus checks in 08 or 09. And they did a study on the dividend delivery. And they have even prices. Again, one of the components is there's going to be a pre-dividend the month before the tax starts. People get a dividend check. And it will be complex. And you are exactly right. I've heard that very clearly from some of our representatives about the complexity. But even within the law itself, it is written that the average administrative fee it starts out higher because you have a lot of buildup and complexity with a relatively small dividend. But it averages, I think it can't average over like more than 2% per year of the program. And again, that the administrative cost is taken out of the dividends so that it does not cost the government. But I will tell you, there will be some snags, and there will have to be an administration that is developed to administer that fee. And, because you get a 1/2 share until you turn, I think, 19. And so families are always changing, just like your tax status in anything else. But you're right, it's not simple, but it has been studied and analyzed with a plan of how to do it.
And the beauty of it compared to regulations is that people are going to get money in their pockets that they are free to spend as they wish. So there's a maximum amount of freedom there and flexibility to use the money in the way that will best suit their family.
What about that California plan that you had referenced? What has been the success or criticisms of that one?
Well, again, California's cap and trade, I don't know the details of it, but, California has been way far ahead in climate goals. And they've done it through a cap and trade, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's kind of a much more complicated system where the government sets caps for pollution. They give certain amount of free credits, and then companies can trade their extra credits. I think it's been fairly effective, but I think like anything else, when you have a lot of potential for interest to kind of lobby for special treatment, again, this idea that we're going to get carbon credits by, preserving forests, that really doesn't do much for the residents of the state. And so that's why I really hope that there will be an ongoing push for a more simple, straightforward carbon pricing system. But I can't tell you, Gail, the complexities, the pros and cons, if anybody else knows more about California's cap and trade.
Well, cap and trade is creates more price volatility for businesses than a price on carbon would, a steady price, steadily rising one.
Right.
It's one of the beauties, I think, of carbon pricing is that it's businesses can make plans based on their expenses. They know there's going to be they pretty much know what's going to be happening in the next 5 to 10 years.
I just like it too, because you feel like as an individual, you maybe have some control over, your energy spending, so to speak. And because sometimes it's so frustrating trying to influence policy changes, but at least that's something that as an individual you could do.
Right.
Other questions? Dennis wants to know who establishes the carbon price increases.
Well, there is, again, it is set in the law that it will be $10 per year, but there is, within that law, there's a timetable of emissions reductions. There's about 3 years that they don't expect emission reductions, and then they have to be, I believe, 5% every year from the previous year. So you have to be on this glide path down. And if that is not met, it's either this, I think it's the EPA, the head of the EPA or Treasury, I should know this, Dennis, that says it's going to be $15, but it's analyzed every year. Emissions are measured every year, and if they're not on that timetable going down, then the decision is made to bump that price up above a $10 per year increase. Did that help?
So does the price adjustment to the business or the corporation, is that individual then, or is this going to be a national $15 or $25, or if I don't?
It's for everybody. Again, that's the beauty of that coming in as it enters the economy. So it's $10 per year increase per every ton of CO2 equivalent. So if it just depends, if you're going to buy coal, people already know that's already been established. This coal you have has so much CO2 equivalent. So the price of your coal that you buy, if you're power plant X, is going to go up. And so it's not individual for each company. It's just assessed on that fossil fuel as it comes in the economy. Does that make sense? You still look slightly confused.
Good.
Oh, Dennis always looks kind of confused.
I like to hear you talk.
Well, now that we've answered, oh, Gail has some.
a question.
So do we have systems in place now in which those emissions are measured, or do we need a whole new administration
No.
to
we just
audit
couldn't.
that data?
They have that. It's not as in emissions, but there are already, like, there's coal taxes that have to go into the Black Lung Association, and there's other systems, and Linda's acting like she knows this, but that has already been figured out. They know very clearly how much a ton of or a gallon of this type of oil versus that type of oil or this type of coal. That's already been figured out.
It's because of the science, the facts.
But
They have all that stuff measured.
Aren't you relying on what companies report?
I don't believe so. No, I think that there, and again, you always need some administration. But yes, there it is. Other, how do I know? They're already assessed taxes on some of these products. And I don't think it's what they report. I think that those products are analyzed and understood to know how much carbon content they have, I believe.
Yeah.
Can you clarify?
I don't have the research here, but yeah, I remember that the research has been done to identify how much emissions come from each type of emission of fuel, I mean. And so it's a hard fact.
Yeah, it's hard.
So if I'm the CEO of Chevron, I would know exactly what my additional tax would be.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people like Chevron are working very hard to get out of the oil business and into the clean energy business.
Yeah, I think Scott hit that nail pretty good. Because I think there's companies, they know what CCL is about. They know what the carbon fee and dividend is. I'm sure they've ran their numbers, and they know how long they can last or lobby the Congress to postpone this as long as possible. But it's the future, and the future of leading that charge. I think businesses that are heavily involved in fossil fuels will lead this. And I think that the Congress will be dragged across the finish line.
You know, one comment I might make is, again, another kind of black eye for some progressives is the fact that the American Petroleum Institute now has saying we want a carbon price. And so it's kind of like, if they want a carbon price, there must, it must be bad. And again, it would be bad if they wanted just a very low carbon price that didn't raise. It's really crucial to have that steadily raising carbon price. That's where the dividend is so crucial, because you have to support that increased price with the dividend. But I will say I haven't seen and don't expect to see any coal companies on board with carbon pricing, because every model says that, again, like we've talked about statistics, coal has at least twice as much carbon pollution per amount of energy that it gets. So that's why coal is the first thing to go, especially when you start putting on a carbon. I will say randomly, since we have a little time, that the University of Columbia did an independent study on the Energy Innovation Act and found that within 10 years, the power sector, just with this one act, would decrease its carbon emissions by 82%, because it would just, when that price came on, it would start switching to renewables, to some nuclear. And there's also viable technology with the price is right for natural gas with carbon capture and storage. And that is that's a controversy, but that is actually something that is viable with a carbon price.
It's all about incentives.
Right.
And sending that price signal throughout the whole economy.
Well, are there other questions for Nancy and Linda from the group.
Well, one of your
Got a
questions,
minute or two left to ask any other questions or comments.
one of the questions that you might be having is, how can I help? So we have an answer for that. You can help build political will for national climate action. We talk with neighbors, friends, and businesses about pricing carbon. And climate decisions that affect businesses are being made in Congress right now. Over 1,000 businesses have endorsed a carbon fee. We reach out to newspapers and public officials and on social media. And by the way, we're very grateful to Booth for the funds that you've donated to CCL. To here in Boise, we've been able to hire an intern to boost our social media activities. And really appreciate that. And of course, we call our members of Congress monthly. That's an important piece of this, because members of Congress tell us that they want to hear from constituents. Nothing is more important to demonstrate our concerns to them and their staff. CCL makes that easy to do. I'd like to try to, I'm going to try to play a video now. We'll see how this goes. Sorry, that's it. Okay, just a second. Let me get my, let me stop sharing this one. Are you guys still there?
We're all
we're
right
here.
here.
Okay, good.
Waiting with bated breath.
I thought I lost you. All right. And okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Oh, okay. Sharing that. Sharing this. Okay. This.
Our volunteer liaisons to Congress have a problem. Congress is not getting enough calls about climate.
We're just not getting enough calls to Congress for them to pay attention to us.
I bet they would listen to you if you could call.
I know you would call every month if you could, Gary.
We're just not on their radar because they're not getting enough calls. I know. I don't get it either.
Yep, Moxie, carbon pricing is popular, but they're not hearing from enough people in our neighborhood.
Our reps said they'd support climate legislation. They said they'd even support a specific bill if we had enough people in the district give a call. Yeah, I know.
Did you know that 33% of people would call Congress if asked by someone they trust? That means you should ask your family, friends, and neighbors to call Congress. All it takes is thumbs and the ability to talk. We'll help you with the rest. We'll send you a monthly text or email reminder with the phone numbers and some talking points. Call Congress today to make our district liaisons and their pets happy. Sign up for CCL's monthly calling campaign at cclcalls.org.
So that. Stop sharing. This. All
I love pictures of dogs
right. Yeah,
and cats.
me too.
That was really well done.
Love that one. Okay, so if you would really like to help, calling your senators and representatives can really make a difference. And it's easy to get started. You can check into, you can go to that website, you can go to CCL and find out how to get sign up for that monthly reminder. We really appreciate your interest in finding climate solutions. Thank you for your work on climate and for letting us share this solution that we think is fiscally conservative, economically efficient, and good for the planet. Thanks.
Yay.
Linda and Nancy, thank you so much. And thank Citizens Climate Lobby for all that you guys do.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Well,
That's
I'm
right.
going to just mention a couple things in closing. We are wrapping up the virtual presentations for Earth Month. This is our last virtual session, and yet there's other things to be busy with during our Earth Month. We just designate 4 weeks randomly around Earth Day. And so please follow the link, go to the webpage of the Boise Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I haven't put that link in lately, but it's there somewhere. And go to the Climate Action Team, Earth Month 2021. And there's a really interesting interactive calendar that Scott and Kathy Sandstrom have assembled with a variety of activities and so forth. So it's still going on for another week or so. I think the 16th is the last day of the month, or 15th maybe. And we've had some really challenging and interesting presentations, and we're very grateful to Citizens Climate Lobby, Nancy and Linda, for your presentation tonight. Citizens Climate Lobby is near and dear to my heart, of course. And is there any last comment from anybody? If you want to, you're all unmuted if you'd like to be, and we'll call it good.
Well, thank
Anything
you,
from
everybody.
anybody?
Thank you.
It was really nice to see
Thank
all
you.
friendly faces.
Thanks.
Keep
all.
up the
Yay.
good work.
Bye.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
thanks,
Yes.
Bootsy and Nancy and Linda.
Keep
Bye-bye.
positive. Bye.